for joining us today in this amazing, beautiful space. I want to introduce you to our guest. We'll start with Noël. Noël is a creative strategist at Netflix, overseeing promotion of product launches for adult animation, comedy, and unscripted titles. She led design teams at True TV and Nickelodeon while teaching at Parsons School of Design. She's also been at Vogue, Details, Sassy, Nickelodeon magazine, and producing Craft Corner Deathmatch, and running a design studio and event planning company. Very busy. Next, we have Sean Gupta. He's the Senior VP of Corporate Development at Tegna and an adjunct professor at Columbia Business School. Previously, he held senior roles at Paramount, including Senior VP for Paramount Plus and Pluto TV, and was a founder and board director of BET Plus. As an Emmy voter, Sean was named one of Cablefax's most influential multi-ethnic media executives in 2020. He holds a BA from the University of Chicago and an MBA from Columbia Business School. Thank you. Next, we have Christie Marchese. She's the founder and CEO of Kinema, a global streaming and screening event platform for independent film, and she's also the EVP of Entertainment Partnership at Publicis Media. She previously founded Picture Motion, an impact entertainment company acquired by Publicis Media in 2020, and she was named as one of Fortune's Rising Female Founders in 2023 and Fast Company's Most Creative People in 2021. And last but not least, we have Rasheed Daniel. He's the CEO and founder of TeamSheed Productions, an independent, Black-owned company advancing inclusion in television. He's a trained stand-up comedian.
Hello.
And he recently launched a development and production partnership with Wheelhouse, building on his success as showrunner and EP for Netflix Wags to Riches. He co-created Deb's House with Deborah Anthony and has credits on The Real Housewives of New Jersey. As a VP at Big Fish, he drove the success of VH1's Black Ink Crew franchise.
I didn't mean for it to be that long, I swear.
Well, you're all super impressive, so I think it's nice to, let everyone know who's here and what you've done and how you landed where you did. So I would love to just go around and have you each share a couple of words about, about your company, how streaming has impacted your corner of the industry.
Okay, I guess I'll start. Thanks for the nice intro. So I am a creative strategist at Netflix, and it's sort of a broad title. What I am in charge of doing is promoting titles on Netflix, not out in the world. That's our marketing team. The product team works on the artwork and the trailers that you see when you log into Netflix. And I'm sure you all know that we make more than one piece of artwork for each of our shows. So I am the strategist that develops the strategy for what that artwork will be. I work with designers and editors. And in my old life, when I was a civilian, before I got to Netflix, I was a 360 creative director. So I had tons of marketing experience, and I worked on key art and trailers. And that stuff is very different from what we do on product at Netflix, because when people log in and they scroll through our content, their eyes rest on the artwork for 0.5 seconds. So in that amount of time, we have to tell our members what they're about to watch, what the genre is. We can't really convey plot in static artwork, but we have to give them as much context as possible in that 0.5 seconds, so that they hover over the image and then annoyingly a video auto plays, even though I don't find that annoying. That to me is more context, more evidence about what I might click into. So we are responsible for helping members choose wisely and correctly. We don't want someone to just click on something because the artwork looks pretty, because if they get to the show and it's nothing like the artwork, then they're going to abandon the title, which is not good at all. We want people to click and stick. That's my goal. I'm looking for clickers and stickers. And when I first got to Netflix, I kind of had to check my design feelings at the door because the artwork that I work on now is so different from key art. It's not as beautiful. It's not as luscious. It's not as developed. And what we've learned through years of testing is that the stills that we pull from content perform really well. Just a direct still, because it's the most authentic way to tell you what you're about to watch. So for me, that was like a little bit of a sad trombone moment because I wanted to design things and I wanted to work on things until you could do no more work on it and it was a beautiful, perfect piece of artwork. But those things are very hard to absorb on on product. When you are looking at a piece of artwork, if it's too busy, your eye just doesn't know where to rest. So I had to really retrain myself as a designer. And then I had to learn the vocabulary to give people directions about how to make this artwork and how to embrace it as a new kind of art. I think the streaming artwork looks so different. YouTube thumbnails, they're crazy, right? There's so much information in those. They're not that easy on the eyes, but they do tell you what you're about to watch. So I have gained a new appreciation for that stuff. So for me, streaming taught me how to look at things differently and taught me a different way to try and engage with my audience.
Great.
Awesome. Your 0.5 seconds works on me every day. So whatever you're doing,
That's
you're doing
what
a
we
great job. Thank you everyone for having me. My name is Sean Gupta. I live here locally. I am the SVP of Corporate Development at Tegna and an adjunct professor at Columbia Business School. I teach a very sexy class called The Business of Television and Streaming. That's the only title I could come up with. I work at Tegna. We own 62 local broadcast stations across the US. So when you're watching your local news, that's actually a different company that owns that station. So if you've heard of Sinclair or Scripps or Nexstar, Tegna is one of the players. Before this role in corporate development and broadcasting, I came from Paramount Plus and Pluto TV, where I was on the streaming strategy team, working on business development and partnership deals. And before that, I ran BET Digital and launched BET Plus, a niche streaming service for BET networks. So to answer your question, I've been in television for 20 years, and how has streaming affected my corner of the world? For some reason, I've always been at a brand when it's making that transition into streaming. I was at BET in 2018 when they started architecting the plans to launch BET Plus for the African American demo here in the United States in 2019. So worked on the launch of that, and then we hired someone from Netflix to run it, and then I sat on the board with my boss and this guy named Tyler Perry, who made a lot of shows for the service. Then I moved to Paramount Plus and Pluto TV after it was already launched and after it was growing, but I joined that team in 2021 when there was substantial investment, substantial focus on growing those streaming services. It was all about Paramount Plus and Pluto TV in 21 and 22. And then I moved to broadcasting now here at Tegna last year in 2024, and local broadcasters are really now focused on transitioning how they deliver local news to you. It can't just be through the broadcast distribution mechanism. We're going to be doing more streaming, more social, and I think just locals catching up to what we should have done a couple years ago. That's it, yeah.
Thank you, Sean.
So hi, I'm Christie. Kinema is a platform I started about 4 years ago. And so, as you said, it's a streaming and screening events platform. What that means is we help independent filmmakers monetize their film through a global screening tours, meaning like local one-time events in community, IRL, but also through direct-to-audience streaming through kind of basic rentals. And we share all the data. You get paid in real time. The idea is that you own your audience and you can take it with you off the platform. My history has kind of been at the intersection of film, online communities, social impact, and marketing. So I worked for a TV producer named Norman Lear, who had this amazing nonprofit, and my job was building out the online communities, which at the time was MySpace. And it was really important to get homepage placement on MySpace or AOL. And with Funny or Die and Heavy.com, we ended up producing like 72 short videos trying to reach young people where they were at for the purpose of the nonprofit, which was to get them to register to vote. I worked at Participant Media then, where my job was building online communities for the films we were releasing. So getting the Waiting for Superman page, the Food Inc. page, the Cove page, Facebook page to over 1 million followers, and organically engaging those communities. Then when I launched Picture Motion, it was taking the idea of doing impact campaigns for films that didn't have distribution, or maybe were moving to streaming platforms, or had a theatrical distributor but didn't have an impact team. So I've been watching and participating in the move of audiences from going to a theater to watching online to watching more on their phone to having much more personalized experiences. And so, I mean, I don't know if that answers the question exactly, but there's been massive shifts. I think we're all experiencing it. And for the films that are on our platform, there was an allotted documentary. There was this golden age of documentary where all the amazing platforms were acquiring loads of these films for prestige and awards. And that shift has changed. Consumer behavior has changed. We're watching different things. And so now there's an amazing list of films that are looking for distribution. So we're helping them do that. We give them the strategies and we give them the platform and the guidance to help find their audiences through our tech.
Thank you. So you've been in the streaming space, really.
I mean, streaming. I would call streaming like early days of YouTube too. Like when we were making videos and like figuring out what we couldn't just get them on YouTube. It was still okay. We're gonna launch this video. We made it with Leonardo DiCaprio and Google's gonna put on the homepage on the Google main page for 1 minute. Like, or how do we get on MySpace or MySpace Politics? Because at the time, traffic was still flowing through homepages. And then for Facebook, we did some video content. It was mostly images and articles, but again, it was organic. How could you create something interesting that could get shared that people would get before advertising started informing the algorithm, and then you had to start spending more? So I feel like we've constantly been responding to how do you find audiences as the platforms and algorithms are constantly changing.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Rasheed?
They're good, huh? Listen, before I started my company, I was a VP at Big Fish Entertainment, and we ran a show called Black Ink Crew that was getting like 1.5 million viewers, right? Which we're not really seeing in the linear space anymore. Long story short, it's very clear that people are going home and watching whatever they want, where we used to have appointment viewing that was great, right? Like if we aired something after something, the fall off was very minimal, and we actually got people to watch. So at Big Fish, one of the first things we did is we started working with Snapchat, and they had no money. I remember the budgets were like 100 grand for like the whole series. And we were like, what's happening? The good news is that if you're newer in the industry, it kind of gives you a shot at the title, right? Because it's kind of like indie film. So creatively, what Snapchat taught us was real story. We were dealing with a rapper named Sway Lee, whose stepfather had been killed by his stepbrother. And it was some crazy story where we were like, look, he's got to confront like his stepbrother and actually have a conversation, go back to Tupelo, Mississippi. And Snapchat called me and they said, that's episode 1. And I said, are you crazy? That's episode 10. We're gonna thread this the whole entire series and we're gonna arc this out the whole entire series. And they were like, no. People have Snapchat on their phones and in 15 seconds we could lose them. And they have the metrics and Netflix has the metrics. Right? Like, that's the biggest difference in streaming that wasn't very accessible to us as much in the linear world, right? They know how fast it takes people to click a tile, take 5 seconds, go on to the next thing. In terms of my company, our first very big sale was a competition show for a network called All Black that was started as a streaming platform under the WeTV AMC franchise. And it was just supposed to be Black scripted content. Tubi would be a very similar like kind of format, right? Lucky for me, there was a huge strike and not one scripted person would work, right? And they were sitting on a streaming budget and they were like, wait, what do we do? Maybe we should get into reality, but we've got to do it very quickly. And maybe we should get into competition reality with a celebrity who's, created Nicki Minaj and all that other stuff. So when we launched Deb's House, basically what I think is happening in the streaming world is my old world of linear is a little bit of a dinosaur. Taking 4 years to edit something, or taking I once had an MTV show that took 2 years to get on the air. Like we shot a dating show in Vancouver, we built these huge sets. F-Boy Island, which is on a streaming network, launched twice, and we were still in the edit. And that amount of money and that amount of burn is not really gonna happen anymore in our industry, in my opinion, right? So I think that's the biggest change that I've seen in scripting, that if you're a newer filmmaker, if you're a newer creator, it actually is kind of your way in, because we're seeing these little pop-ups happen all over the place. I don't know if they'll survive, but SVOD and AVOD and all that other sort of stuff. But what's really happening is like, ooh, can you give us great content like it's on the internet? Right? Because every time I walk up to a DP, I tell them, hey, why does the internet look better than what we're shooting over here? So as the technology is growing and growing and growing, I think it's important that we look at, how we produce and how we produce quicker. Love Island is not just a streaming show, but they're cutting around the clock so that you're getting, ITV is cutting around the clock so that you're getting the content the next day, right? So I think it's just a different world right now, and let's embrace it.
Yeah, I think those are such good points and stuff we don't really think about, like how it's just so quickly, also just because the medium's getting cheaper to make, so we see a lot more creators. Sean, can you tell us a little bit about, just because you're at the channels, you're sort of at the root of all this, AVOD versus SVOD, how the industry is changing from your perspective?
Sure. Okay, let's go through some basics. My favorite acronyms: AVOD, SVOD, TVOD, PVOD, right? I should just go home. I didn't know this. Okay, love it. Okay, so SVOD is subscription video on demand. You're all, I think most of you, probably 95% of you, are paying for Netflix as an example of that. Paramount Plus is an example of that. You pay a monthly fee. And we've seen substantial growth in SVOD over the past, I would say, 10 to 12 years, and that growth is now slowing down. It's highly penetrated across the United States. AVOD is advertising video on demand, so when you're watching a video with an ad in it, that would be called AVOD, and potentially the advertising platform that has ads on it in Amazon Prime or Netflix or Peacock could also be called AVOD. FAST is free ad-supported television, so think of Pluto, Tubi, Samsung TV Plus. Those have had substantial growth since about 2020. And think of that as we've really gone back to the 1970s, and FAST has a traditional EPG setup with channels. When FAST launched, it was like, cats and dogs videos and bloopers, and now it's become really high quality programming. Of course, it has ads in it, but classic sitcoms do really well, movies do really well, cowboys do really well in FAST. There's New York Times articles about all of these classic shows from the 60s, 70s, and 80s do very, very well on FAST. PVOD is premium video on demand, so when you're buying a movie for $19.99, and then what did you say?
This one someone told me today, they're like, I'm gonna release it on TOD. I was like, what's
Theatrical
TOD?
on demand?
Theatrical on demand.
So that's when I paid $19.99 for the movie.
It's actually when it's going into a theater. So someone can choose a local theater, pick a film, and sell tickets to it. So they're calling it theatrical on demand, where you can only go if enough tickets sell, then the theater will play it. It might be a little loose on the definitions of on demand here, but they're calling it theatrical on demand.
Got it. And all of these have had substantial growth because Americans actually want different types of platforms. Not everybody can afford multiple SVOD subscriptions. Some people want ads, some people don't. It is our job to create as many options and packages for Americans. The ones that want ads can have it. The ones that, can afford multiple SVOD subscriptions with no ads is fine. But of course, we need to be able to monetize that content. That content that we create for you is very, very expensive to watch. When you binge a show on Netflix on a weekend, you might be binging $100 million worth of programming. And I just want you to put that into context next time you're complaining about an ad. It costs a lot to make this television. Some of the shows that were created during what we call the Platinum Age of Television in 2017, 18, 19, 20 were upwards of $20 million an hour. So just keep that in mind. But those are your basic terms, yeah.
Great, thank you. Christie, what about your platform where you're not ad-driven, is that correct?
That's correct.
So how does that, how do filmmakers get on your platform? How do you monetize, what's the revenue stream like?
Yeah, so how does everybody make money? So there's two rights that we work with. It is your non-theatrical exhibition, also known as your community screening or your grassroots screening. Essentially means a third party is going to license your film for a flat rate. That rate is dependent on their organization type, business, not a business, selling tickets, not a selling tickets, and their audience size, 50 people, 5,000 people. Or they sell tickets and then do a split with you. The second is your transactional VOD. So they're coming to the site, they pick your film, and they rent it at whatever price you set, and you can turn on and pay what you wish. And then of that, we do a revenue share percentage. We do have a curation policy, so the film has to be festival quality, has to be in at least one festival, or if you're choosing to skip festivals, which many films we work with do, it's got to be at that quality, and our team looks at it. And then meet our code of conduct. It's not misinformation, it's not targeting certain groups, and so it's still got to be a good enough quality. But we try not to be, the common term people say is a gatekeeper, which is understandable. People are the bigger institutional distributors are thoughtful about what works for their audience, and not every film does. And so that often gets the term gatekeeping in a negative sense, which I understand. But we're trying not to be a gatekeeper by having a wide option of films that can come in, but we also have to think about our audience and what we think they'd want to watch.
And are you in the US only?
Actually, no, we're global. So our biggest audiences are US, UK, Australia, Canada. We have geo-blocking in the system, so once your film is approved, you have a full dashboard where you can manage everything. You can block certain countries, you can enable certain countries, you can set your timeline, you can come and go as you please.
It's amazing. I mean, it's just so great with, having another outlet where smaller films can find a home. It's great.
Well, I'm very happy to say we have No Other Land, which won the Oscar this year. That'll be available on Monday for US audiences.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rasheed, what about you when you're pitching now? Do you feel like, the programs that are getting bought you just mentioned, I think Sean just mentioned, like the budgets are going down. How is that affecting sort of your development slate and the things that you go out with in terms of just, things going straight to streaming or having, the bigger networks behind them?
It's funny. I didn't think of. We made a lot of money in 17 through 19, right? Who called it the golden age, right? Because people were right? Because people were sitting at home and watching television, right? So you had them, right? Now we're talking a lot, specifically with my partnership with Wheelhouse, about the creator economy, right? So very recently, it was the middle of COVID, and a TikToker named Kabi Lane. You guys know him as he's Senegalese and he does this move. Right, he doesn't speak, but he does references, and basically Tubi and a lot of other advertisers were like, but if you put him in a tile, people will click that. Whereas if you remember back in the day, there used to be shows that were like, oh, this is 14 people living in a barber salon, and maybe you should watch it. And that we're not really seeing any play with. Right? So development-wise, I'm we have a very big talent department that's attaching talent to projects before we bring it out, right? So, the development's gotten very hard. So the ability to really work towards a network is extremely hard. So most people are looking at companies like Kinema?
Kinema's our porn brand. Thank you.
Kinema is our other company, but we won't talk about that one.
Of course I'd mention the porn brand on stage. Kinema and Publicis and making deal partnerships with branded entertainment, right? Because someone's got, to Sean's point, the commercial's got to come back in some way or another, right? Because someone's got to fund all this content because we're working at this weird deficit of putting all this money into it, and then you guys don't want to watch any ads, and my kids don't want to watch any ads. I have a 9-year-old who's like, skip ad, skip ad, skip ad. So, but if there's a Mr. Beast, he'll watch it, right? Because if Mr. Beast is like, here's chicken McNuggets, then he's gonna watch that, right? So 3 things. 1, I think it's really important that you grab people in the development pitch in the first 5 seconds, honestly. And I think a lot of people who are pitching these very artistic, crazy ideas that are not elevator pitches anymore. Everyone thinks we want to hear these, and the first response that I always have is that's not good, right? So you gotta grab them immediately, and someone's gotta say, one network said to me, I wanna clutch my pearls as soon as I hear your pitch, right? I wanna go, oh! And then once you clutch pearls, you got them, and then when you say, hey, we've actually got this person signed on, right? And that could be, we have development deals with a bunch of A-list celebrities who are now moving. If you watch what's gonna happen on these linear channels, you're gonna see random people pop up on HGTV, for example, right? Where Retta hosts a big show with my former company, Big Fish Entertainment, where she goes into crazy houses. And it's the comedian Retta, right? So it's gonna be about star power, and it's gonna be about really grabbing in the initial moments, right? And then in terms of development, it's going to be about why does your idea matter? It's just my advice to all developers in the room. Everyone's got the same idea. That's my message, right? You think your idea is the best idea in the whole entire world. There's 40 other producers who have pitched the same thing, even me, right? I walk into Netflix and I'm like, hey, this is a great idea. And they're like, heard it 40 times. What's your take on it that is Love is Blind, that is a conversation piece that Love is Blind, for example, was created, I did not create it, was created during the Black Lives Matter movement in COVID, and this whole idea of can you get engaged to someone and not know their race was hot in this country at the time, right? That made you go to the bar and be like, hey, could you get engaged to a black guy without your mom, right? And then you're talking, right? And that's what development is for me now, right? That if that conversation can happen, then people stay on it. That's why everyone likes Love is Blind and all that, different sort of stuff.
Can I follow up on this because it's so interesting? So when you have this kind of idea, how do you get it somewhere? Like, how do you get someone to buy it? What does your package look like?
The package, in a lot of ways, pushes forward than just the paper in a lot of things that we're doing. We're doing a lot of tone tapes, right? So we're ripping information from a whole bunch of other places and putting them together, because sometimes shooting a pilot, let's say with an A-list celebrity, doesn't really work. Right? Do they want to sit down for a pilot and like really be with you for $0? No. But I think the best thing about, the last thing I said is like, look, you have a lot of good technology. You can rip a whole bunch of stuff and kind of like imply what your competition show about, Christie jumping out of buildings and things like that, right? You can really imply what the show's going to be, because one exec who will remain nameless is like, no one's reading your pitch, right? They're like, you're sending a 30-page deck thinking that executives who get 400 emails, I used to get really pissed off when I was a director that an executive friend of mine wouldn't email me back. I'd be like, what? I hung out with that guy, I drank with that guy, why didn't he hit me, man, what's up? But then when you realize that most executives, specifically buyers, are inundated, especially if you're a big buyer, you're inundated with email after email after email. So if you make it very easy, if there is a link that's 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever, that you can click very quickly and say, wow, right? If you make them say, wow, that's what's happening, right? If the reel looks good and it's at level, to wow, how'd they do this with no money? That's what people want. They want to see that you can do it with no money, because everyone is scared that we're going to give you money and then you're going to blow it. And yeah.
Such good advice. Thank you. Noël, 2 questions for you. So the first one is, what are the genres that are sort of like no-brainers for you guys and that, people will watch regardless, and what are the ones that are much more work and more difficult to market? And my second question is, I have a 14-year-old who only watches YouTube Shorts. And so I wonder, like, how do you draw that audience back in, to sort of, go back to watching more traditional shows?
So I'll answer that question first. That's the big question that Netflix is asking right now. How do we recently acquired the first season of Ms. Rachel. If anybody here has young kids, Ms. Rachel. I am not a fan of hers, but
Someone's taping here.
No, there's no taping, there's no recording, it's all off the record. I love Ms. Rachel.
She's the best, she's so cool, Such
she's
a nice lady.
She teaches kids to read, and her methods are great, and she's a YouTube star, and she does really well on Netflix, and her shows are short. We need to figure out how to get the younger audience into Netflix, because YouTube Shorts are great. They're so watchable, and you could just watch them all day long. And that's one of the things, we're trying to figure out as we sort of scale the rest of our business and work on the stuff that we know is tried and true, and we can produce it and create it for not that much money, because we know how to do it. It's formulaic. People are going to watch it. I'm talking about the Virgin Rivers of it all. Those shows that are, they go down really easy. They are not expensive to produce, but we will keep hosting those shows because people are watching them. So that's part of what our big goals are for the future. And as far as genres that are surefire, reality, I think is, you said it, right? Our reality shows are almost a no-brainer. They are almost always going to do well. What's the spin on something in particular that's going to make you really want to watch something? Really good editing, I think, and really good producers that know how to take, hours and hours of footage and pare it down to something salacious or interesting or juicy. I think the genre that's really tricky, and this is my genre, is adult animation. And we have a huge slate at Netflix, and the shows are so good. But people don't really come to Netflix for that type of content. And so
Can you give us an example of like, is that like Bob's
Burgers is adult animation. It's not on Netflix though.
Sorry. No Bob's Burgers.
I mean,
Blue Eyed
Fox-
Ninja? Blue Eyed
Big
Ninja?
Mouth. Sorry?
Blue Eyed Ninja?
Yeah, not Blue Eyed Ninja.
Big Mouth?
Blue Eye Samurai.
Blue Eye Samurai.
Blue Eye Samurai, Big Mouth, right? So Big Mouth, Blue Eye Samurai, these are all shows I've worked on, and Big Mouth just its final season just aired in May. That was 8 seasons. That is like, that's Netflix history, right? It was on Netflix for all those years, and it did well every single year. We're about to launch a new show from that team in May. That's about adults dating. But they're animals, and it's very, very funny. But the thing that's difficult is if, for example, with Big Mouth, if you don't like the artwork style, the characters, they're kind of ugly, right? But and I remember when it first launched, I remember 2 of my workmates at Nickelodeon wouldn't watch it because they were too ugly. And I said, but you watched Rugrats when you were little, right? They were really ugly. That was an ugly show, but you loved it, and you loved their voices, and so they tried it, and they loved it. And of course, they watched the whole thing at once, because binge watching, right? But it's really difficult to convince somebody in 0.5 seconds that this character with a big head, big lips, big eyes, and a tiny body is gonna bring the jokes every minute, and it is a joke a minute on that show. So it's something like we recently launched a show from the BoJack creator, Raphael Bob Waxberg. It's called Long Story Short, and it's a very particular style, the artwork. It's a great show. It's kind of like This Is Us, jumps back and forth in time. It's a little bit tender, it's funny, but the artwork is really special, I will say. I love it. It appeals to me, but it's a real blocker for that type of show. And it's hard for people to know that this purple and pink person, these purple and pink people, are going to speak to them emotionally and make them laugh and make them cry. So we test everything, all of the artwork that we make, and we also test the AV assets that we make. And for something like Long Story Short, we tried a couple of different things. We'll never use different artwork. We'll never go out that far out from what the show looks like, except for Blue Eye Samurai. For that one, we worked with a couple of different artists to create key art, basically, for product. And it was groundbreaking at Netflix for that kind of thing to happen for animation. With something like Long Story Short, it's a real trust buster. If you see something really beautiful and a rendered character that doesn't look anything like what you're gonna see when you click in, then we've lost the audience. So we tried a couple of different kinds of short videos, which did quite well. I should clarify that on product, we don't use the same assets that our social team makes because they're so social forward. And people are not coming to Netflix to watch social assets. They're coming to watch the actual content, the shows or the films. So we can't really promote them with social stuff. But those assets are so great, and they work off service to get the conversation rolling. Then when people come to product, we help with the choosing. So reality is always great. I work on a lot of doc series and some doc films, and the ones that are, I think, surefire and will totally do well are the ones that we can create a little tiny piece of artwork for that says it really quickly. So I worked on the Steven Spielberg UFO series, which the name of it escapes me now because it was, I think, 3 years ago. And there was an image from a newscast that looked kind of like aliens. It looked so fake, and it was fake. And we decided to use that as a piece of our artwork on product. And Spielberg was dead set against it because it wasn't elevated and it wasn't fabulous and beautiful. We had lots of those in our product suite as well, but that one did the best. And our designer color-coded it a little bit and made it, kind of gave it a red tint because it launched around the same time as a season of Stranger Things. And that red tint told people like, oh, this is something fantastic. And so I think that we try to help the genres that need a little bit of a boost. We try to help those out. With something like Love is Blind, Or I think Love is Blind is the one where there's a piece of artwork where it's just a woman, her midsection. It's very, you're gonna click that, right?
And Kinema, that's where
We have it as Kinema.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I have a question for whoever wants to take it. When I worked at Miramax a long time ago, and we bought an Italian film, we had to dub it because people wouldn't read subtitles. And even Train Spotting, we had to dub pieces because, people wouldn't read the little subtitles we put. So nowadays, everyone's reading subtitles. I know, like, my kid is watching American content with subtitles. The world's becoming smaller. We see a lot of content from everywhere. And so I think streaming has really facilitated that. And so I'm just wondering if, how it's affecting your business.
Streaming has affected the ability to distribute it globally, but what's happening with AI is making it easier to add the subtitles, to add the dubbing, to change the artwork, to make all of that easier, to make sure that it reaches as many audiences as possible very quickly. Right back in the day, it would take a couple weeks or months to get everything subtitled and all the audio fixed, etc. Now it could happen in 24 hours.
But Sean, do you find, like, with your networks that they're just buying more international content and that they're even starting, like, international station? Like, do you feel like it's just becoming bigger?
If we think about the cable networks, the broadcast networks, or even the streamers, I think there was this big shift to buy more international content during what I call the platinum age of television, 2021, 22. And they wanted to buy things that were really, truly global also, but then they realized that they still need to be really local. The only player that I think is trying to go as global as possible may be your house. Yeah, for sure.
We're doing it. We are. I think because Netflix grew region by region, and the global/local of it all is really what we got good at. We have always subbed and dubbed in, now we're up to 34 languages that we do subs and dubs in. And the dubbing, I was shocked. When I started at Netflix, I was onboarded for 3 months, which I am not a young person, and I've been in many jobs, and I thought that would be crazy. Why do I have to be onboarded for that long? But I had to learn about every single department I would be coming into contact with, and there are tons of cross-functional teams that I work with. For dubbing, the dubbing is insane. The care that's taken for the dubbing and for the subbing. There are writers that are making sure, and it's not AI, right? It's real people. And there's some tooling that we use that is definitely helping us, and that's AI. But these are people that are respecting the film, respecting the filmmaker, and writing subtitles that are translated properly for every single language. And also working with the filmmaker to make sure that they are representing things properly. So I think Netflix truly is global, and as these smaller regions are growing, this is where we're getting more members now. We're setting up bigger studios there, and we're working with local filmmakers and local actors, and it's actually pretty amazing. But it's truly global.
You can have some global franchises, but then your local content is still important to drive. Yeah. And Netflix is big enough to have actual people during this,
yes,
the subbing and dubbing, but I think it's smaller
they started
places.
Small,
of course,
right?
Of
Netflix
course.
started doing it with so few people. It was tiny, and then they just grew and grew.
But now a smaller filmmaker can call Google. Google can actually sub and dub it and change the lips so it looks like it's in its local language.
And it looks pretty
and
good.
I saw it a couple
right?
years ago, and then everybody was too freaked out. But now it's becoming more and more.
We haven't seen a lot of it yet. I will say, like, most of our films that perform really well are documentary, and that might be a little messy if you start messing with people's mouths in a documentary. But yes, subtitles are so important, and we notice that not just the different languages, but because we're all so used to turning them on. And I watch Bridgerton with subtitles. The British is too heavy for me. But we're all used to it. And so now we notice if a film doesn't have subtitles, and we send them tools that they can use and translators they can work with, or someone who can write it, we have users that get very angry. They're upset that they can't read it because they're used to it, or because they have any sort of disability. And by the way, Squid Games, I highly recommend watching with the English dub and the subtitles. They are different. And it's so fascinating to watch. So you see the care that's taken into it. The words match as much as possible in the mouth, but what's written is so much different, but it's probably contextually or more accurate for what the writer originally had.
Yep.
That's amazing. Rasheed, what advice do you give the filmmakers in here, who are going out there and, pitching their shows and trying to develop new material? What advice would you have?
I'm going to steal it from Spike Lee. Spike said that when he went to film school, the number one important thing was to get access to a 35 millimeter camera, right? That like getting access to editing equipment or film equipment was the most important thing. I think I've seen like 4 cameras in this room already that are shooting about 6K, and like 3 of them are phones and 1 of them is right there, right? So in the new iPhone Pro commercial, if you notice it, right? Like it's like they put on an easy rig on an iPhone and they're like pushing it through battle. My number one advice: shoot it. Shoot it. Make it better later. Shoot it. Just try it, right? Because the development process, if I'm going to be very honest, I think has accelerated a million times over. And every single time I've sat down and edit myself, or I've like put something together myself, it's given me the understanding of like, that actor actually kind of sucked, right? That script line didn't really work, right? My team just went to a screening of a film. It was done by a good friend of mine who was an editor named Michelle Salcedo. She was just in the New York Latin American Film Festival. And she made a choice in filming in Serbia, some big action movie, that she would not shoot by traditional film rules. That the team was like, we're gonna shoot all the masters first. This is her advice, right? And they went in and they were gonna blow up a gas station and they're gonna shoot the masters first. And when she noticed the 2 actors, it's like a buddy comedy, coming out of the trailers and walking on the set, their chemistry was hot. But the camera's way over there, right? So what you learn as a director and what you have faith in is that she figured out, wait, I need the chemistry in this film more than even the scenics. I need 2 people this close and close up, like acting like that they are becoming from enemies to friends. I need to catch that. So think about the emotion and the story, most importantly. If you go out and shoot your own stuff, think about the emotion, the story, and the performance that you're grabbing. Because I think film can get really bold and big, and it can turn into, like, I myself have directed huge scenes, jibs and planes and all this stuff, and I was a kid director, and I brought it back to the BBC, and they were like, where's the story? And I was like, did you see the jib shot, though? Did you see that we went plane to plane? I literally shot plane to plane. I was like 30. I was like, oh my God, we have headsets on, it's going crazy. And my exec at the BBC was like, what's the story? And even in reality, we're seeing a lot of this too, because people think what we do is a little bit easier because it's getting accelerated. But people have got to, like when we pitch Netflix, we have to say what the scene emotion is, even in a reality show. We're gonna walk in a store and we're gonna buy doggy furniture. Cool. Is it supposed to be, or am I supposed to feel funny? Am I supposed to feel happy? So my number one advice to answer your question is please try to shoot it. You can always shoot it again, right? Try to get together for free. Like Kevin Hart said that when he lost all of his money, this is an autobiography, when he lost all of his money, he grabbed all of his friends and he was like, we're gonna go to comedy clubs. And I'm gonna do comedy and you're gonna get all the numbers and put them on MySpace. Right? And we're gonna like get a group of people behind us, right? So in comedy, that's a big thing, right? You need a following. In film, you need a following. You need a film festival, right? You need something to show. Because all these scripts that are just sitting around might just end up being scripts that are sitting around.
I have a question for the audience. Who used to have a MySpace account? Oh, so many still. All right. So,
The younger people are like, MySpace who?
Yeah, right, exactly. Rasheed, this is such good advice. Thank you so much. Christie, what about you? What would you say, is sort of the most important? So a lot of people have films that are finished. How do they get to a place like Kinema, or how, what do you advise?
So we actually say the same thing, like in different words of like, just get started. I think if you can sit too long in ideating or coming up with the big budget and then having to raise the big budget. So we say like, just get started to build some sort of concept for it. Second is, if you know what your story is that you want to tell, you have to really understand your audience. It's like in this day and age, like the way films are getting distributed and the way everybody has to market, even if you're Netflix or the bigger platforms, you have to know who your audience is and how to reach them, and that budget has to match that audience. And what I mean by that is like, specifically, imagine the person who's most likely to see this film. Who are they? Where do they live? Who do they listen to? Because you should be building a plan to distribute on your own independently to give yourself the space to have negotiations when you do take it to market. So it's not about having like, oh, my plan B is I'm gonna self-distribute, that's why I need this budget. No, this is how I already know my film so well, I know my audience so well, and I'm coming with a budget. So it puts you in a better negotiating position if you get the opportunity to be in a room with one of the buyers. I think the other thing is just be very clear about your goals. This is probably repetitive. A lot of us, like in the indie space, say this. You have like 4 goals. Pick one of them. Are you trying to make money? Are you trying to make an impact? Are you trying to find an audience? Are you trying to build your career? And that is your North Star. And like, yes, the other things can fall into place after that, but you have to pick one of them, because then the financial decisions, the production decisions, the distributor decisions are all going to fall in line after that. If you work with a festival strategist versus an impact strategist, if you release on YouTube direct to audience versus working with a sales agent, you have to be really clear and steadfast in that goal.
Wait, and then if you want to make money, if like that's your goal, like take notes, right? I think that's a really big thing in independent filmmaking, that like someone can come in at any point and say, we hate this panel. That could happen, right? They could be like, trash the whole entire thing. And you as an artist are tough, right? It's tough. That like see your face. She was like, "Oh my God, they made me feel so bad." And I've had real moments in networks where people.
I'm gonna go to med school.
like I'm leaving, right? But if you want to make money, then your artistic ability, you have to think a little bit commercial, right? The industry is based off of making money. That is a thing. So a lot of other people can come in and be like, we don't like I heard a rumor, I don't know if this is true, that Apple will not give you money if you use an Apple phone for a villain. Right? Like
Same with Sony too.
Right? So it's like you could have shot the best scene in the whole entire world, and the villain could be FaceTiming, and they're like, sorry, gotta be an android. And you gotta reshoot that thing, because if that's your funder, then your exec, wherever your fund's coming from, be ready. I'm really, as a developer, I'm really into the idea that like your idea can be amazing, but the collective, especially when it comes to fundraising, does matter.
Also, I think that's true, and it's ruined movies for me, because now if I see one of the characters has an android, I'm like, oh, he's the villain.
Exactly.
Right, immediately.
We spoiled it for you.
Wait, can I ask one thing about taking notes? If you're new, if you're just starting out, how do you know which notes to address and which notes to push back on?
Real answer?
Yeah.
You'll feel it.
Okay.
That's the real answer, and I know that feels weird, but I'm a very spiritual person, despite the pocket square, right? Like, I think that when you're creating, you are sometimes looking at your scenes and you might go, that's not that great, right? And that's okay, right? Like the ability to edit and re-edit and like really rework dialogue, or like if you didn't feel anything in that scene, someone else might come in and they might have I'm a crazy idea person, right? Like that's how I've advanced in my career. I walk in and I'm like, blow it all up, right? Or you could have someone come in and they could be douchey, right? Like we had an advertiser who came in and really dumbed down a show because they were afraid, right? They got fearful. And when you sense fear in the other person, that's a little bit different than when you sense upgrade.